Biofuels are the epitome of the world's ecological energy supply. Although renewable, energy sources such as solar and kinetic energies boast 100% carbon-free emissions. Why has Singapore yet to adopt such environmentally friendly energy production sources? Well, it is no surprise that solar panels and wind turbines require optimal conditions to operate in, not to mention the large acres of land traded away for low amounts of energy produced, approximately 2 kilowatts per hour and 8 megawatts per day for one solar and wind turbine respectively. Needless to say, our government has opted for a more viable energy source to feed our 5 million population, which are biofuels. Biofuels are essentially biomass that can come from a variety of sources: food waste, algae, crops, and modified fuels. For example, ethanol, the most common biofuel, can be obtained through various crops such as corn and grain, and undergoes heavy transitions through fermentation to obtain the end product. Advantages of ethanol. Ethanol is usually mixed with 90% gasoline, effectively cutting down on the 10% petrol requirement, which in turn allows for less greenhouse gas to emit from fuel burning. Ethanol is relatively cheap, at about $2.64 per gallon, or about $10 per kilogram. Ethanol is also easily accessible, unrestricted by trade or independent production, as the source is always in abundance. Disadvantages of ethanol. However, the energy conversion rate per kg for ethanol is only 21 megajoules per kg, which is the lowest per kg compared to other options. Ethanol requires copious amounts of crops redirected from the dairy market to feed the ethanol production, which is unreliable due to the fragile nature of crops, which can disrupt crop yields due to natural crises such as floods and dry seasons. Lastly, Singapore does not hail from large acres of farmable land and thus is unable to domestically grow crops to produce ethanol.
Another example is palm oil, also known as palmitic acid, imported from Indonesia, is worth 36.5 megajoules per kilogram, and its price in 2020 costs $752 per ton, or about 7.5 USD per kilogram.
By trading with neighboring countries, we are able to forge or deepen diplomatic ties with other nations. Moreover, palm oil-based biofuels also help engines operate longer due to their naturally high viscosity rates. However, because it is a product imported from overseas, the country exporting the palm oil will have leverage over our energy source, meaning our fuel source is directly in their control and they are able to abuse this privilege for political gains. Hence, we will never have the security needed to be confident in our independence and must maintain a favorable connection with the government on both sides in order to not be threatened. For example, the countries in the European Union dependent on the natural gas reserves that the Russians have and directly fueling the war in Ukraine with the money they spend on their gas needs. But despite not wanting to fuel the conflict, the people of the European Union have no choice but to cede in order to survive through the harsh winters or just for daily use.
Lastly, microalgae-based biofuels are projected as a suitable alternative to fossil fuel because of their promising yield in nature. Besides, their sustainable advantage over traditional terrestrial feedstock. Advantages of microalgae. They possess novel metabolic features such as their incredible growth rate at tenfold compared to terrestrial crops, which can tuned in for the commercial scale production of renewable biofuels. Microalgae has been proven to be the most effective production cost per unit biofuel amongst the three, as it requires little resource and arable land, which is well suited for small countries such as Singapore in order to produce microalgae. Sitting at $2.29 per kg, it is the most cost-effective investment for an energy source. Microalgae produces an approximate of 37.2 megajoules per kg and reigns over the other sources of biofuels.
However, genetic abilities of identified microalgal strains are far from optimum to serve as feedstocks for sustainable production. Microalgae is an energy source in prototype and experimentation as even today. Genetic improvement of inherent capacities such as high photosynthetic conversion rates, rapid biomass production, alteration to their core structures for the generation of suitable biofuel feedstocks, and adaptation to diverse climatic conditions are still being experimented to reach ideal levels. Moreover, microalgae requires a large source of government financing as it is currently restricted to domestic production and not readily available for exporting. Hence, only developed countries have the capacity to commence a microalgae research and production program. Another compelling argument against microalgae is its tendency to produce CO2. Like fossil fuels, algae fuel releases CO2 when burned, but unlike fossil fuels, algae fuel and other biofuels only release CO2 recently removed from the atmosphere via photosynthesis as the algae or plant grows. Fortunately, the rapid stride in genome biology studies and high-throughput genome sequencing and transcriptome mapping in diverse oleaginous organisms have ensured a means to analyze and manipulate metabolic pathways by triggering the expression of candidate genes for enhanced lipid production in microalgae.
To summarize, ethanol, a standard textbook definition of a biofuel, utilizes renewable sources to produce energy, is mildly cost efficient, and seeks to reduce carbon emissions. However, it sacrifices arable land and crop yields in order to produce energy, which is unsuitable for Singapore to domestically produce. Imported palm oil, like ethanol, uses renewable sources to produce a higher amount of energy, is more cost efficient than ethanol, can be used to deepen ties between nations. However, politics may hinder essential trading of energy, and thus, this renders the biofuel unreliable. Lastly, microalgae is the most cost-effective, producing the highest energy conversion rate, while also being the cheapest option. Although the research and mass production of microalgae is expensive initially, it is a long-term investment for a landlocked country like Singapore. It is therefore clear that our suggestion for a susceptible biofuel to use is microalgae, as although it has the most expensive initial cost of the ones we have listed, it is the most suitable for us as it can be domestically produced, does not require us to be independent on imports, reduce our crop yield harshly, minimizing the impact of our freshwater, and also allows us to use little land compared to ethanol or palm oil.
Minecraft. I like it cut G.